If some leaders are using the UNGA to pitch for re-election, others are using it to meddle in foreign conflicts. Case in point, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. It's an old habit of his. Erdogan rattles out his opinion on every conflict at the General Assembly. But just one problem. No one has ever asked for it. This year too, he did exactly that. Erdogan raised the issue of Kashmir during his address. Listen to this.
India and Pakistan, after having established their sovereignty and independence 75 years ago, they still haven't established peace and solidarity between one another. And this is much unfortunate. We hope and pray that a fair and a permanent peace and prosperity will be established in Kashmir.
Two ways of looking at this. Number one, Erdogan has no business commenting on Kashmir. It is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. So Turkiye does not have a stake. Number two, how does this statement compare to Erdogan's past remarks? Time for a short history lesson. In 2019, Erdogan openly criticized India. He said that Kashmir residents were living under a virtual blockade. In 2020, he called it a burning issue. Remember, this is after the Indian government abrogated Kashmir statehood. Erdogan said that the move complicated matters. Finally, in 2021, he talked about UN resolutions. He said the conflict must be resolved through the United Nations. Which brings us to the present, to 2022. No mention of blockades, no comment on Kashmir statehood. Instead, Erdogan made a rather broad remark. He said he prayed for permanent peace and prosperity in Kashmir. And that's not all. He said that it's up to India and Pakistan to resolve it. In other words, he admitted that it is in fact a bilateral issue, not some rallying call for the Muslim world. But the question is, how should India receive this? Two factors will influence New Delhi's thinking. One is the wording. In diplomacy, semantics are extremely important. While virtual blockade is a hostile statement, praying for peace is relatively better. Not ideal, but certainly better. Second, the backdrop of Erdogan's address. Last week, the Turkish president was in Uzbekistan for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. He held a meeting there with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, this meeting was a surprise. It was not part of Prime Minister Modi's schedule. Neither was it mentioned by the Turkish government. It signaled an attempt to reset ties between New Delhi and Ankara. Things have spiraled since 2019. Erdogan had drawn up grand plans to lead the Islamic world, and for that, he chose Kashmir as a rallying point. He turned it into a core issue to unite all Muslim nations. Needless to say, he failed. But in the last 3 years, Turkiye's economy has suffered. That brings me to my next point. So Erdogan is rebuilding all the bridges that he had burned. With Israel, with Saudi Arabia, with the UAE, and now perhaps with India. So there is reason to believe that Erdogan is climbing down from his radical position. Having said that, India must still be wary. After all, Kashmir is a bilateral issue. No world leader has any business talking about it at the General Assembly. So guess what New Delhi did? A bit of tit-for-tat diplomacy, as they say. External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar met his Turkish counterpart on Tuesday. They talked about a wide range of issues: the war in Ukraine, the food crisis, India's G20 presidency, and also Cyprus. Now, that last topic is a rather sensitive one for Turkiye. Let me explain. Cyprus is an island in the Mediterranean Sea. In 1974, Turkiye invaded the northern part of the island. They created a breakaway region called Northern Cyprus. Only one country in the world recognizes them. Guess which one? Turkiye themselves. India's position on this conflict has been consistent from day one. It must be resolved based on United Nations resolutions. So this tit-for-tat diplomacy isn't exactly new. In 2019, Prime Minister Modi met with the President of Cyprus, and that meeting too was on the sidelines of the UNGA. Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's support for Cypriot independence and integrity. A clear indictment of Turkiye. The bottom line is this: India must be wary. Yes, Erdogan's statements hint at a climb down of sorts, but remember whom we are talking about. one of the most ambitious and ruthless leaders on the world stage. Erdogan's circumstances are forcing him to reset ties with the world. His economy is stagnating. He faces re-election next year, so he has no option but to repair relations. But knowing Erdogan, this isn't an ideological pivot. This is simply political convenience. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.